Hey, oh my gosh, it's happening again. Welcome back, everybody. Thrilled to have you on here. This is somebody that I got to meet in person, and I've met him many, many, many times. And I thought I have to bring him on my show. So, without any further delay, here is information about today's guest. Today's guest is a visual content maestro and storytelling savant whose mission is to make your business pop in the crowded marketplace. His company's creations, be it in animation, video, or graphic design, are not just seen but experienced. He's the best selling author of The Content Beast, where he shares insights into how visual storytelling has been lauded across various platforms, earning him a place as a trusted voice in AI consulting, keynote speaking, and, of course, content creation. He is not only a TEDx speaker and an adjunct professor, but also the visionary force behind compelling visual narratives that have helped businesses connect meaningfully with their audiences. With a background as diverse as his talents, he believes in the transformative power of visuals and stories to shape human experiences. Please join me in welcoming Geoffrey Klein. Welcome, Geoffrey.
Thanks, Robbie. I don't know if I would call myself a savant. Some of those words you use were too flattering, I think. Too flattering. I don't know. I'm blushing.
You've earned all of them. So we got to meet through the National Speakers Association chapter. In fact, you were at the very first event a year ago that I
Mhm.
attended in the Philadelphia chapter when I was fairly new to the area. I knew I wanted to have you on this show. The show is about building connections, but it's also the context is leadership. So tell me, how do you define leadership, and when did you realize you had the skills to lead?
I define leadership as getting the best out of the people you're working with. So I think a lot of the times, it's not about you being on an island or on a mountain or whatever it may be. It's some one of the things I always think about what a leadership is. They say, when you surround yourself with, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room as a leader. You want to have all those other people around you that make whatever objective, whatever task you're trying to do, the best it can be. And I think being an effective leader is about listening. It's a skill that I have to actively develop. Um, I'm a pretty good listener, but I really like to talk. So that as it becomes a challenge. But it's about asking important questions. I think one of the things, my mother is a leadership coach. My wife's a leadership coach. So I'm surrounded by people who do this as a living. Um, and one of the things that I think when they go into an organization, when they meet with someone new, they ask lots of questions. So I think being a leader, a really key skill is being curious, which happens to also be a skill in what I do, trying to create these compelling content. You need to be curious and understand what it is people are trying to do, who's the audience you're trying to reach, what's important to them. And I think it's that flipping it from not being about you, but about being the people that you're trying to help that really defines the best leaders who are able to get the best out of the people who they're trying to lead.
So I already learned some things about you that I didn't know. I didn't know that your mother and your wife were leadership coaches. That's
Yeah,
pretty
well,
incredible.
my mother's been an executive coach for and consultant for 40 plus years, and so
Uh-huh.
yeah, and she's really thoughtful. She works with all people in the C-suite, and I've learned from her the power of asking sometimes hard questions, direct questions, but all in the service of helping someone.
Yeah. Well, and as you said, it's about helping people become their best selves and
Mhm.
contribute the most way to whatever the project is at hand, and using curiosity to get at what that means for them. When did you start to realize you had some of these attributes?
Well, it's interesting. Growing up, I would have said, "Oh yeah, I'm a great leader," because I was loud and in your face and telling people what to do. So that was my early definition of what being a and I think I realized as I got more mature the softer side of being a leader. Um, a- and I've liked to take leadership roles. I like to be engaged, and I think that's partly why I raise my hand uh, to volunteer for things because I like to be engaged, and I otherwise I'll be bored, and that's the worst thing that can happen. Um, but I think I started to even in high school, the way I was a leader was I saw those skills was helping others learn. So in study groups and things, I found that I would do better in whatever subject if I helped someone else do better. Because as I'm trying to teach them, it reinforced things for myself. And I think that's still the case with a lot of what I do. I'm obsessed with AI, and I realize every time I'm sharing with someone about what I know about it, I'm like, oh, I'm learning more as I'm diving in. And so I think I've always enjoyed teaching, and I think there was Adam Markel, who's an amazing speaker and trainer. He said, leaders are teachers, and so I think that's I learned early. I like to help people learn. I like to learn. That's the be curious part, and therefore, when I realized how much I enjoyed helping others learn something and how it also benefited me, I saw, okay, this is something I enjoy doing. And now I think where my real skill set is in synthesize, taking things that are complex and making them digestible for other people. As a
Mhm.
video and animation, we have to explain things. That's why they call them explainer videos. So the idea is to take something complex and be forced in the process to make them simple and understandable for people. And I think that's a skill that leaders should need to have.
That's great. I was thinking about who you probably were growing up. So now I wanna actually know. Like, what were you like on the playgrounds? Were you the kid who organized people or sat back? I don't see you sitting back. Um, did you have student, like, leadership opportunities in high school? Did teachers see potential in you? Were the adults sort of choosing you to take on leadership opportunities? Like, what kind of kid were you growing up, and where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I went to a Quaker school, a friend's school, which was, I think helped engender some of parts of service as well as just being, um, encouraging individual characteristics, whatever they may have been. But yeah, the playground, I was organizing. I was, whether it was, and games. I love games, and I still love games. So it was an opportunity for me to. I have I've always had a lot of enthusiasm for life, whatever it is, being engaged. So literally from kindergarten, and then yes, in high school, I was involved in student council and other groups as well. Um, but it was partly to have fun. I think that's where it stems from. Is
Mhm.
my interest is in play, and it's interesting. We're going to be we involved in a play summit, and I think the idea of enjoying what you're doing, like I see people in jobs and in careers that they don't like, and we have a big problem with disengagement. And I think if we found things we liked, we would have a lot more fun. And so job, and I mean not my job, but my job in life is to try and bring some of that enthusiasm to people. I
Mhm.
think it's important to have a good time, and I think people like working with me because they don't. I bring some, I'll even say silliness, and some humor and some lightness to what might otherwise not necessarily be uh, an environment that they're used to having the freedom to do that.
Mhm.
And I think it's not that I don't take what I do seriously. I do. I just don't take myself that seriously.
Yeah, I totally see that. I see that playing out in the way you show up in a room. So when you were, say, 12 or so years old, did you have a clear sense of what you wanted to be when you grew up? Was there a path laid out in front of you by expectations, or were you still kind of figuring all that out?
So it's interesting. I remember clearly we call it middle school, junior high. There was me and two of my close friends were brought into the principal's office and told, you are the leaders of your grade, and therefore you have responsibility.
Uh-huh.
So, but in terms of career, my father and grandfather were judges for 80 plus years. And therefore, at that time, I was like, I'm going to become a judge or a lawyer at least. I was going to go into the legal field, despite the fact, and I enjoyed public speaking and things that weren't really normal for maybe a 12-year-old. We had a speech class, and I was like excited about it in ways that everyone else was dreading. Um, and so I think, but I also had a real creative spirit. I loved movies. I was obsessed with movies, and therefore, and I liked writing. And so I think I had this kind of dream over to the side, which is like, oh, I'd like to do something that's a little more creative, a little more, dynamic. But then there was the like serious was like, no, you're going to go to law school. And the reality is, I did both. So that's the funny part is I satisfied. I went to law school, but I've never practiced as a lawyer, and I've worked in the creative space for most of my career.
I almost was thinking entertainment lawyer. Like when you're talking about your love of movies, I was imagining, but you probably get into the weeds. It's not as much fun as what you're doing because you don't
Well, it's
really
interesting.
are.
Well, yeah, when I was in law school, that was the thought. I was
Yeah,
going to become an entertainment lawyer,
I
and
could
we
totally
had a
see that
family friend
happening
who
fast.
was one. But I think it complements sort of. I have a friend. There's the show and movie Entourage, and my friend said, if he had stayed in the film industry, he saw me as like the Ari character who was like the agent. And there's good and bad because he's not. There's some good and bad parts of his personality, but he did have a lot of enthusiasm. But I think what eventually happened when I decided to really go ahead and dive all in on film is that being an entertainment lawyer was yeah, not the interesting part to me.
Right.
Dealing with contracts and things, not it was
Not the
too far
creative part.
removed from the creative process.
Yeah,
Yeah,
too
it was too
very
far removed
removed.
from it.
Yeah, around a lot of creative people, which could be frustrating because they don't dot their I's and cross their T's. So that's interesting. It's that you clearly focus on formal education. You have this sort of
Mhm.
family generational responsibility to pursue that. But then somewhere along the line, you realize you are able to focus on something other than the legal side of things. What were some of the ways you kept the creativity alive throughout those years of schooling? Like, what were those side hustles or projects that you were involved in?
The first thought I had was when I was in law school. So I went to Temple Law School knowing I didn't want to be a lawyer. And as a result, that puts you in a really good position, a really challenging position. Because on the one hand, I was like, oh, I'm not that bothered how I do because it's not what I want to do. On the other hand, it was like, oh, why am I taking this class? This is not interesting to me. But I spent a good deal of my law school experience playing games in the lobby and I would basically bring people in to take a break from the studying, to take a break from the rigor of law school, and yeah, try and bring that lightness and that enthusiasm to what was everyone was very serious in law school, and I just wasn't. So that's how I dealt with it was by trying to pull people into my world of fun. And again, I did well in law school, so it was not a matter of that I didn't understand the parameters. There's once you can goof off of things, but at some point you have to take care of business, and that's kind of how I've always approached life. I went to Amherst College, and people always describe the kind of culture there: hard at work, hard at play. And I think there's an element that's how I live my life. I don't know. The work life balance. I continue to not really like that characterization. Like you have work over here, and then all of a sudden you turn into a different person over here. Um, and I've started to recognize that it just bleeds too much, and so there's a work life blend. Um, and I think, but I really have been lucky to have support of family and friends, and particularly, I think my upbringing
Yeah.
that instilled a value of you got to enjoy what you do. Um,
You're talking about work life. I always thought of it as integration, so similar to your blend. And I
mhm.
just learned about or reacquainted myself with an organization called Third Path Institute that helps people with that third path of work life integration. So I'll put information in the show notes because I'm going to be going to some of their events in the next few months. But they have a separate track for parents because that's a different level of difficult integrating parenting, work, life all together. But they work with a lot of executives who get very busy and over focused and then need to figure how to weave life back in. Uh,
Mm.
you get to the end. It's interesting that you very fascinating to me that you went into law school knowing the outcome was that you would not be an attorney. I went to grad school for social work, knowing I would not be a social worker. But social work has a lot of places, like an MSW is just useful. I focus on the
Hmm.
macro communities, organizations, groups, which I use all the time. Like I do think that I am using the skills that I learned, but I knew I didn't want to do direct practice. Was it some way where you thought these skills that I'm going to learn in law school will benefit me going forward? Like, did you have a sense of the transferable skill set, even though the job itself wasn't the one you wanted?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think that my approach in law school, knowing that I was pretty sure I didn't want to be an attorney, was twofold. One, it's a great, you know, um, experience to have those skills, whether it's critical thinking or negotiation or just learning how to read something and synthesize it. And but I think the other part of it was like, oh, it was like the fallback. So it was the escape plan. If your dream path doesn't work out, you can always fall back on it, which is not a great way to be involved in something. Um, but I think it also gave the context of people assume, rightly or wrongly, that I'm smart. Now I think they're right, but because I went to law school, like people, there's certain we say, oh, if he went to law school, he must work hard, he must be smart, and I don't dissuade that perception. I
Mhm.
think whatever it is, your experiences, whatever the ways you can present yourself in the best light is worth doing, and without always being genuine about it. But I think again, you got people. When I tell people my experience and they hear my story, like that's really interesting. I'm like, well, it's the only one I got. Like it's just like so. It's not like you can make so. And it reminds me of the quote from Oscar Wilde. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. So yeah,
I
I
know a
think
number of
every
people who
experience
I know
adds
a
up
number of
to it.
people who have MBAs that it's similarly or a doctorate in an area that
Right.
you would think to have a doctorate. Um, like I just talking to someone who's a doctor in entrepreneurship. You don't
There you go.
need a doctorate in entrepreneurship to be an entrepreneur, but the fact that you have one, like
Right.
that's a
Right.
differentiator, like right there, right? Like that's clearly someone's done well. Um, so I just want to ask, you get to the end of your law school career, you got to make a decision about what's next. How did you not just end up taking the offer to go into a law firm or whatever all your peers were
Yeah.
doing? What was catching your eye that you were more drawn to at that point? Like, where did you first step off into?
Yeah. I think it's important for me to share intentionality. I think about what you want to do. So I think the reason I went to law school is I wasn't ready to move to LA. And so in my second year of law school, I went out to LA for a week. But before I went out, and people would say, "What do you want to do?" I'd say, "I want to work in the film industry." And they go, "Oh, I know someone." I'm like, "Who?" And I would write it down. And so I curated a lot of meetings for that one week in LA. And I had a job offer for two jobs in the summer after my second year of law school. So it was like the intention to do it and then executing out, networking with the right people. A lot of people said to me when I would say it, I got two responses. Generally, big, oh, I might know someone and that'd be great. Or they're like, oh, that's hard. How are you going to do that? And those are, I have a big category of people I call the naysayers. And you have to, I think, sometimes just nod and say, yeah. But because I'm going to do it. And so after that week, I actually moved to LA. So in between my second and third year of law school, I ended up becoming a visiting student at a law school in LA to take my last year's credits. So I was actually going to law schools on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I was working at an agencies Mondays and Wednesdays, and a production companies on Fridays.
Huh.
So I started in the film industry before I finished law school. Um, and kind of never looked back in terms of being a lawyer. I worked with some lawyers at the studio I worked at and some other agents, and confirmed that's not what I wanted to do. So yeah, the transition was about taking the leap. And
But it
again, I
also
have to say,
sounds like
having
you
the support.
prepared yourself. You prepared yourself for the transition by having that year where everything was overlapping, which sounds like a lot. But you also, I mean, I didn't know visiting student was a thing until you just said that. So I would be like, oh, I'm stuck in this location geographically until I'm done with this degree. And you were like, nope. But also, you kind of almost created your own internships in order to
Mm-hmm.
experience what those paths would be like while still in law school, so that you finish the degree, which is, lauded just for doing that, while having these two other roles that you were developing skill sets and relationships. So when you got to the end, it wasn't like fresh start, where do I go now? You
Right.
already had really developed roots and connections, and had some sense of what you liked and didn't like. By the way, it only took me a 1 hour seminar to know that I didn't want to go to law school. So I thought
Yeah,
about it. I
I got
did.
to encourage people, so yeah.
I'm a fast learner. I was like, okay, I don't need that. Great. I'm not gonna do it then. But
Well,
wow. Okay. So I know you as the content guy, and lately as the AI guy, because you've really started to focus more on that. And I know you've got this book, The Content Beast. So I know you as a speaker and an author, and like that's the world you're in, which is my world as well. So
mhm,
how did you make your way? Like, just give me that quick, like, you're in LA, you're in like the film industry, and broadly speaking, you've got these different opportunities.
mhm,
When did you go from that, which is still being employed by people, right? You had jobs, JOBs, as I
mhm,
like to call them,
yes.
to now being the entrepreneur, self-employed. It's all about your decision about what happens next. People like jobs. People think of them as very secure until you go
Mhm.
through 3 layoffs and transitions and mergers and, right, acquisitions and all of that. Like, they seem so secure from the outset. Um, but when did you start to think, I have something else that I wanna do? Like, the another act that I need to pursue.
Yes, there's actually a middle act and then a third. I'm in
Okay, so
my
what's the
third
middle
or
act?
fourth act, but the middle act is I fell in love. So,
Aw.
and my yes, and we've been married over 20 years now, 22 this year. And she's from England. So we met in LA, fell in love, got married in Philadelphia, and then we're living in LA, saying we're very close with our families, and we had no family in LA. And so when we started thinking about having a family, we're like, well, where are we going to do this? And we decided to move to England, to Manchester, where her family was. And I started working with my father-in-law. Now I don't know in real estate. So the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, many people know it's like the poor dad is the one who like gets a good job and goes to school, and then the rich dad is actually the guy who makes money from being an entrepreneur and that sort of thing. And so I had grown up, as strange as it sounds, with poor dad. My dad, you know, uh, Harvard educated law, judge of prestige, but he wasn't wealthy. I mean, he was a civil servant. So, but he was, his mentality was, you work hard and you have a career, and he had a great career, and he loved what he did. My father-in-law left school at 15 and worked a million different careers and jobs, and was self-made and did very well, incredible with people, and then happened to have a real uh, acumen for property values, what things cost, and and is an incredibly hardworking person. It's interesting because he and I share that enthusiasm. Like, he has fun, he laughs and jokes with everyone, and everyone loves hanging out with him because he's a lot of fun. Um, and he works with all the across the board of real estate. So I went and worked with him, and then decided to start my own thing. I was like, okay, I've learned enough from you now. I'm going to do my own thing. And so I started. I had built um, a foundation with him, and then started a real estate company, and thinking that that was going to solve the problem. And the problem was that I hated it. As a property developer, as a property manager, which is my job was to chase rent, find people to stick in the properties, and deal with maintenance, not creative. And so I like to have had a mini kind of midlife crisis. And I said, I can't do real estate the rest of my life. I have to do something else. And I went and got a job in England working for a design agency. that did branding and websites and logos, and I was like, marketing. So there was no real film industry in Manchester, but marketing enabled me to take my love of the creative and my interest in kind of analytics and business and law and put them together. So it fed both parts of my brain. And so I did that job. And then when we moved back to Philadelphia, I went to go work for a brand marketing agency. And because I had had the entrepreneurial experience, because when I became an entrepreneur in England, I had small children. That was part of the thing, was like, I had twin daughters and then a son. And so I grew up wanting to be able to, I grew up with my parents very engaged in my life. I wanted to be that kind of father. And the freedom and flexibility of being an entrepreneur satisfied that.
Mhm.
It also satisfied the ability to like be the captain of your ship, or however, to really chart the destiny and whatever. One of the things I learned about working with my father was whatever effort you put in, it was for you and your family. And that's how he approached it. It was like, as an entrepreneur, the more effort you put in to your business, you get the rewards, as opposed to the job, where you might work really, really hard and maybe you get recognized and maybe you don't. So when I moved back to Philly, I worked for a brand marketing agency for 2.5 years. And then I was kind of, that entrepreneurial bug had said, I still wanted to have the flexibility to go and see my daughter's volleyball game or my son's basketball game. And I think I probably work harder than I did when I was in a job, because entrepreneurs don't clock in and clock out. You do things on the weekend, you do things in the morning, in the night. But I think the difference about it is it's much more fulfilling, because hopefully if you're an entrepreneur, you're pursuing something that you have a passion for. And then B, you're doing it for yourself or for your family. They're my kids. Everything I do is for my wife and my kids. And when I was working in real estate, before I made that decision to go into marketing, and I was waking up with dread, I had that mentality of, I can't change. I've got a mortgage, I've got car payments, I've got people to look after. And I don't know what to credit. I think I just had the support of people around me to finally recognize, no, I have to change, because I can't be a role model for my children doing something I don't love. And so that was the real shift into it. And I kind of never looked back.
It's a really great second act experience. The fact that your father-in-law really lived in that way and you were able to witness how he showed up, but to also realize that you weren't interested in doing that, specifically that kind of role,
Right.
that there was no creativity, just chasing people down. And then discovering marketing. Like for me, your discovering of marketing is almost like my discovery of business coaching. Like I had been doing it without knowing what it was called and without
Right.
being paid for a very, very long time. I was meeting with people at coffee shops for the hour before I had to start my day job.
Right.
And on any random topic, I joked it was me, my brain, and my BlackBerry. Like that's how I showed up. So BlackBerry tells you what year it was.
I had a Palm Pilot, so yeah, I was gonna say I was a Palm Pilot guy.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's like you don't realize how to take the thing you're naturally drawn to and good at and what role that really is in the world until you get exposed to more and more things. It's like from the outside, you don't know all the roles in a company. Once you're in a company, you start to see the nuances. And so for you to discover marketing and branding and communication and like realize that that was your, like, creativity could be a lot of things, but that was really creative for you. That's really fun, like the how you sort of discovered that. It also sounds like you had an amazingly supportive family around you. I mean, I credit my success to that as well. I mean, my ability to pursue things. It's, I was saying this the other day. It takes a certain kind of personality to be an entrepreneur, but it's even harder for me to imagine the personality of being partnered with an entrepreneur. Like, wow. I don't
It
know how
has
well I would do that.
challenges, and
But
especially coming from the opposite experience.
yeah, I'm really grateful that there are people in the world who are good at partnering with entrepreneurs. That's quite something. So, when did you, how many years ago is it that you sort of went out on your own? And what was that first product?
Yeah, so it's I started Nine Dots about 7.5 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah. And when I started, I was like, what do you need? So it started, my first project was a logo for a nonprofit. And I had a friend who was a graphic designer. And so it went great. It was a really good experience. And so for a number of years, I kind of did a whole bunch of stuff. I was kind of a marketing broker. So because I had graphic designers, I knew web people, I knew um, people that did social media, I brand strategy, and I was doing a lot of everything. Um, and then at one point, I did a lot of websites with a partner, and then I had that kind of epiphany of like, I don't want to do everything to do with marketing. There are parts of it I don't like, and so I really recognized. I actually had the conversation with myself. What is it that you like the most? And therefore you think you're getting better at? What are the things that when you have that project you get excited, and what's the project you have that you're not that excited? And being able to really have the space to identify what makes you tick and excited and what doesn't was huge, because I was still enjoying the other parts, but not it was a little less satisfying than I thought it could be. And when I really decided visual storytelling, so it was basically content creation, whether it's video or animation and some graphics, I stopped doing all the other stuff and now just focus on this and became happier. I know, and I think because when you focus on that one thing, you get better at it. So the people I started doing some of the projects with, I would kind of up level, whether it was the videographer or the animation team, as I focused on it and was like, wait, no, I don't want to do this. But I think as entrepreneurs, we're often worried about leaving money on the table. And so I was like, oh, someone says to me, can you do websites? I'm like, of course I could do websites. And at some point, I remember the time I'm like, no, I don't do websites, but I can put you into someone who does. Because when you take on that project, it means there's one less project of the things you really want to be doing. And that's a hard lesson to learn, but a really important one.
It's so important. Okay, I'm gonna have to repeat some of the things you just said and put my own twist on it because I feel like there's such gold in what you're describing as an entrepreneur. And I know that initial year or two, you do feel like you're just saying yes to everybody, and you haven't quite. I remember feeling very frustrated with the question, "Who's your ideal client?" Like every course that I signed up for or coach that I talked to, that was the first question or first module, and I didn't know because I had not yet worked with my ideal client. I
Mhm.
was just doing the things that I could find. And I just felt
Right.
really frustrated that I was supposed to make up out of whole cloth this person and then just sort of tell you, oh, yeah, they drink Starbucks, not Dunkin', and they listen to podcasts, not audiobooks, in their car, not their shower. Like, how do I know? I don't know. And we're now having worked with my ideal client in the different works. I have very distinct revenue streams. I now can tell you a lot about each one of them because I'm blending the characteristics of a group of people that I've worked with over time. And there's some things that sort of repeat and you realize who you're attracting. So I remember just like that moment when you realize I have to shift from everybody to somebody. And as
Mhm.
a coach, that's the part that I usually work with clients with. And they're like, but I'm like, I know, but like it's easier to get referred if you are known for a thing within a
Right.
certain space. Like if you become known in this industry for one particular thing, doesn't mean you'll never do those other things,
Right.
but also recognizing what makes you happy. Like I've worked with people on firing clients, and I have a whole process of list them by dollar amount that you earn over an annual recurring, and then resort them by how much joy it is to see them, and the people who are the bottom work to close that. And in my second book, Small is Big Results, I've got a whole little Venn diagram around um, expertise, which is the thing you know how to do really, really well, like in your sleep,
Mhm.
passion, what you would do for free because you just so love talking about it. And then the third circle has impact and income. It's the things that you can really help people and people recognize it so much so that they want to pay you. Like the payment part is just sort of part of that. And in between is the ideal client. But if they ask you for expertise about something that you're not passionate about, maybe it's your old job, right? It's the old thing you were known for. Yeah, you can get money and you can help them, but too much of that becomes its own like burnout. Like that's the burnout pitfall. And you don't want to over index on the thing you're passionate about but don't know how to do because now you're like constantly hustling to try to learn something. So it's a different trap because you don't have time to try like to serve anyone else. So finding that balance and having a portfolio that makes sense. I mean, the fact that you're 7.5 years is both a little bit of time and a lot of time in an entrepreneur's life. It's cool that you've dialing that in. And I kept hearing also when you were talking about this was referral network. Like you don't have to manage the project to help a person find the right like next step. Like you don't have to manage the web designer. You could just refer to a web designer
Right.
and still be a person they keep coming back to because you solve problems, even if you aren't directly responsible for getting the website done. They will continuously come back to you for anything related to creativity, content, etc. So kudos. I just want to say kudos for being where you
Thank you.
are and being really clear and taking the time to have that conversation with yourself because it does feel like you're leaving money. But when you double down on the things that you truly love, more abundance comes to you.
100%. It's
Okay.
funny. Also, the other flip, the one other thing we talk about the referral network, it has two impacts. One, yes, people come to you when you're in that. Oh, Jeffrey's a marketing guy. He may not do. He'll know how to do this. But then those people that you're referring, they refer back, and
Right.
that's why I think it's important to have those relationships with people who complement what you're doing. Those referral partners of people that, and I ask a lot of people, people sometimes I'll, the life insurance. And I'm like, I don't, it's very unlikely I'm going to refer someone to go get life insurance. So when I meet with someone in a networking event, I'm like, what do you do in their life insurance? I'll ask them, who are your referral partners? Who are the people you want to get introduced to? And they'll be like, oh, estate lawyers or whatever it may be. So that, because one of the things that I do want to do is connect the dots for them.
Yes.
And sometimes if you can't directly help someone or you're not directly going to be the client or get them the client, who are the people in their sphere of influence that makes sense for me to help connect with them?
You just beautifully segued into networking. So let me ask you the question I always ask, which is, if you, there are people that you're going to stay in touch with. They're sort of your inner circle people that it doesn't take a lot of effort. You're going to stay in touch with them. Then there's sort of the second and third tiers or layers out. People you see once a year at a conference, people you work with maybe 5 years ago, but you haven't had a reason to since. People that you enjoy and they enjoy you. You're happy to hear from them out of the blue, but you have to sort of be thoughtful about how you maintain those connections. What are the habits, philosophies, or practices that you use to stay in touch with sort of your looser connections?
The one thing I've been known for among my friends and extended friends is birthdays. I'm a
Mm.
big birthday person. So when I had my little Palm Pilot, I had everyone's birthday in it. And therefore, there's people who I've been friends with, whether it's college 30 years ago, who hear from me once a year on their birthday. And they'll be like, I can't believe you still do this. I can't believe, like, after all these years, you're the one person who consistently reaches out on my birthday, and who I'm not in their inner circle, And so I think that's been one way. And with something like LinkedIn that now tells you when people's birthdays are, or when I think LinkedIn notifications is a wonderful tool. So I do that as a habit of checking, okay, who's got a new job, who's got a work anniversary, who's got a birthday. Because they're little touch points that people, just a little acknowledgement
Mhm.
of people. And I believe that you should celebrate lots of things, but we as a society have decided that birthdays are the official one to celebrate. So I've just said, okay, well, might as well, take that one. It's an easy one. And people still find it really special to be, contacted on their birthday. And so I think that's been a habit that I've had for years. That has kept me in good stead with people. Just, whether or not I have a need or not. And I think that's part of the game is to connect with people, to reach out to people, to stay connected without necessarily doing it for some gain. That it's just you're doing it because you have a nature where you just want to stay. I believe that the goal of all humanity is to connect. Like, that's why we're all here. And I think that the best way to do that is with effective communication. So there are lots of communication ways. So I always say, having an email list is important in the sense that when you send an email, even if they don't open it, and people focus so much on open rates, even if they don't open it, they still see your name. And so you're getting top of mind. Because with clients and with things that way they're seeing. So having a regular email or a newsletter makes people see you. I'll go and be at a networking event, or I'll be walking around and bump into someone I haven't seen. I'm like, oh, I saw your thing on LinkedIn. Not that they liked it or commented on it, but that they recognize that. I'm like, oh, great. And so it's being visible and being out there. And then I think there is, I'm working now, and I've done it in the past, on being very intentional about my past clients and setting up a sequence so that I'm okay. I haven't talked to them in 6 months. Let the automation piece go. Say, hey, I haven't been. Here's sharing with them. Hey, I just thought you'd appreciate this latest project I did. Or hey, what's going on with you? And I think there's a combination of interest and sharing that's okay. But it's, people do it to me occasionally. I do it to people a lot, where I'm like, hey, it's been a while. I see something that just happened. I'll see triggers on the feed of my LinkedIn. So whether it's something they've put out there, or they've just changing job transitions are always really good ones, I think. Because again, you're celebrating something. Oh, they just have been somewhere for 5 years. Wow, 5 years already? Like, it's taking an interest. And it comes back to the networking event advice I learned years ago about the distinction between being interesting and being interested. And so the idea that when you go to a networking event, you have to, hi, let me tell you all about myself and how great I am and all these wonderful, and people don't care, or don't care as much as you think they do. And being genuinely interested, I mean, it's all the way back to Dale Carnegie, genuine interest in people matters. And I think it is kind of a habit. Like, so
no, I love,
some people have others, but I think
I always say, like,
it's important.
The benefit of we're now told when everyone's birthdays are is how can we make our outreach a little more personal? So, like, not just commenting on the post, but sending a direct message. Or if you heard about it on LinkedIn, send the direct message on Facebook. If you have a cell phone number, text them, or who knows, call them. Like how can
I call a lot of people.
How can you ratchet that up a little bit so that it stands out? Like, I joke that if my mom only commented on my Facebook wall for my birthday, I would assume that she totally forgot about it, because so many things happen on the Facebook wall. So, if she wrote HBD, like, that wouldn't be enough. So, like, these little things do matter and add up. And also, like you said, the visibility of posting and sending out outreach and all that. We're about to get to my favorite wrap-up question, but before that, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsors. Okay, so the benefit of this question is I know for a fact you and I are going to stay in touch, because I always like to say a year from now when we're talking, and I know that we're going to hang out because you're local to me and you're fun, as we've already established. So a year from now, we're hanging out, and one of us remembers that it was a year ago that we had this conversation, this interview, and I'm going to then ask you, wow, hey, what are you celebrating? What's been happening since that year? And I want to know what we're going to toast. So what are you most looking forward to in the year ahead?
Personally or professionally?
All of the above.
Okay, well, I'll start with professional, since this sort of a business context to this. So as I'm deeply in AI, I will have a book out as a follow-up to the Content Beast about AI that's tentatively titled When AI Meets the Content Beast. And I'll be celebrating that for sure. But more importantly, I'll be celebrating I'm in the process of developing AI courses for people, for individuals and for organizations, because I think the need for education and training in the AI space is growing, and there's not a lot of it that's particularly good. And so I'm doing what I think is the hard work of trying to synthesize all the stuff that's going on in AI that's moving very quickly, and coming up with a course on AI literacy, AI proficiency, and AI mastery. And the idea being that as you come through the landscape of AI, where are you? And so you start with not really knowing much. And so, how's an organization saying, we know we need to learn about AI? Where do we start? You start with an AI literacy course. And so then once you start implementing it, then you're like, okay, wait, we need to get a little more proficient at this. And then there are ways to do that in terms of integrating, doing a technology audit and starting to look at the tasks. And then, okay, we've been using AI for a while. Now we want to ramp it up and optimize it. And that's where AI Master comes in. So I'll be celebrating how successful that has been. And then in terms of personally, my son will make varsity basketball, and my daughters will be thriving at their second year, and have just landed their summer internship for next summer, and they're super excited about it.
That's all amazing. I can't wait to celebrate all of that with you. And when it comes to your book, count me in for your launch team, because I love a good book launch, and I'd love to chat with you about your book launch strategies. So how can people find you and follow your work?
So I started a LinkedIn newsletter in January. So that's definitely, LinkedIn is where I spend most of my time, because I believe that's where most of my audience is. And so I always say to people, go to where people that you're trying to reach, where are they paying attention? And so for me, LinkedIn. So that's the easiest place probably to find me. And then I'm usually either GG Klein or 9 Dots Media in most social spaces. ggklein.com is my speaker page. 9 Dots Media is my video and animation page. Or just reach out to me, Geoffrey at 9dotsmedia.com. I'm always up for conversations to try and help people.
Well, we're going to put all those links in the show notes, including a link to your TEDx talk. And you have a YouTube and an Instagram, and of course your LinkedIn. All those will be on the website at ontheschmooze.com. Geoffrey, thank you so much for this conversation. I really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Robbie. A pleasure.